he announced to the world that Muammar Gaddafi has been killed on the hands of the revolutionaries.
He called himself King of Kings. Look on his works, ye mighty, and despair. A turning point for Libya, North Africa, and the Middle East. They may be celebrating the end of the Gaddafi era, but can the new Libya hold together and flourish as a democracy? We'll hear from Senator John McCain, the British government, and the new Libyan government. We'll debate the future and the lessons for dealing with dictators. Plus, Gaddafi, the power of the image. We explore the iconography of dictatorship. And a major development in the story we broke last night about a police officer who remained undercover even in court. Now an independent investigation is launched. Well, now for some sense of the significance of today's events and where it leaves the Arab Spring as we go into autumn. I'm joined by the Conservative MP Rory Stewart and Nabila Ramdani, who's a French-Algerian writer, and from Washington by David Gordon, formerly with the US State Department. David Gordon, just on that point of your sense of this moment in history, how big a deal is this, do you think?
Well, I think it's a quite big deal. Obviously, it's a very big deal for Libya. And I'm actually of the view that it's probably a good thing for Libya that Gaddafi is dead and that there's not a trial. I actually think that trials, the trial of Saddam Hussein, the trial of Mubarak, actually don't help to bring the country together. I think that the death of Gaddafi, coincident with the fall of Sirte, really gives the potential to have a dramatic end to the conflict period here and move on to what will be a very challenging stage, but one that holds a lot of promise, that of rebuilding Libya and creating a new regime here, a new, more democratic dispensation. For the rest of the region...
I just want to bring in Nabila Ramdani on that point. I mean, do you regret there's not going to be a trial? Are you worried about the circumstances of his death? Do you think people will actually care all that much now that he's gone?
I think ideally you clearly want to see, justice, the rule of law and due process apply to anyone, including, a murderous tyrant like Gaddafi. But I have to say that his death took place in the context of a savage civil war. I'm afraid to say it was almost inevitable that he was going to end up that way, given the amount of hatred that he managed to build up throughout the decades where he ruled with an iron fist. And, he, at the end of the day, created a very barbaric society. And it's that very barbaric society which killed him.
Rory, you were listening to Senator John McCain a few moments ago, and he said there are dictators all around the world, including, he pointed out, the leadership in China and Russia should pay attention to this because they can be overthrown. I mean, what did you make of that? Did he overstep it, or is he going to point?
I disagree with Senator McCain. I think it's very dangerous to try to draw those connections. I don't think Putin or China are going to be sleeping uneasily in their bed because of this. I think it's basically a Middle Eastern, North African phenomenon, and I think one of the dangers is thinking, as John McCain seemed to imply, that we've found some universal model and that this is the beginning of what he calls a new spring for the world. I think that's very dangerous talk.
David Gordon, I don't know if you heard Senator McCain say that, but he was suggesting it's a new spring for the world. I mean, what do you make of that? Do you think he's right or wrong?
Yeah, no, I basically agree with Rory. I mean, I think that this is very significant in the region, but the significance I would put primarily in two states. I think that Syria is now at considerable risk, and President Assad is at considerable risk of seeing his regime, I think, begin to unravel somewhat more quickly. And I think behind that, especially if Assad goes, then the regime in Iran could really see, I think, an uptick in political opposition. But I think Rory is right. The notion that this spreads to China, to Russia, is just very far-fetched at this point.
One of the things that we've been dealing with all night is this question of lessons for whom, including lessons perhaps for Britain, France, the United States, and so on, about intervention, what works and what doesn't work. How do you think this has actually been seen through the Arab world, given that there was a big consensus, Arab League and so on, that something should be done to protect Benghazi?
Well, I think clearly the victory of British foreign policy and indeed French foreign policy will perhaps, buoy up those governments to think their foreign policy in a new way, meaning that they will perhaps value military interventions in the future, just like Tony Blair did after his success in Kosovo. He valued military action elsewhere and he pursued it in Sierra Leone, Afghanistan and indeed finally in Iraq. So it might be that Western governments, including Britain, might feel brave enough to take on new countries.
Do you think that's a good thing? I mean, I'm sure Rory's going to disagree with this because I know his views. But I mean, we heard about Iran, the possibility of more protests in Iran. We know what a mess Syria's in. I don't see any appetite in the Western powers to get involved in the same way as they did in Libya. Do you?
Well, clearly, for Western powers, Libya was a far better was a safer bet. Sorry, it doesn't have the regional implication that Syria, for example, has. Gaddafi was a friendless dictator. He doesn't have the regional, powerful regional allies that Syria has that can pose a threat to the world and indeed to the region. And a final point, dare I say, Libya offers very attractive prospects in terms of oil and natural gas, which will make the military adventures absolutely worthwhile.
I think the other key lesson is that Libya did seem to have regional support. It had UN support. And although that doesn't go to the moral rights or wrongs of it, it's absolutely crucial for whether we can really do these things. If you go into a country like Syria where the UN support is very flaky, where the regional support isn't there, you're in a very, very dangerous situation.
What have we learned about that? Do you think? I mean, liberal interventionism has peaked, or is that it, or will we see more of the same?
I hope what we've learned from this is firstly that every condition is different, but secondly, no boots on the ground, strong regional support, strong UN support. You've got to hope, but you've got to be very patient. We had an almost stalemate for 6 months. You've got to hold your nerve. I completely disagree with this McCain idea that we should have gone in hard from the beginning, shown off the full extent of American air power. What I really felt when I was in Tripoli is that this had worked best because Libyans felt it was their thing. They felt it was like Egypt, they felt it was like Tunisia, they felt they owned it, and that's why they were celebrating the square in the way we never saw people celebrate in Baghdad or Kabul.
David Gordon, obviously President Obama welcomed this, but when you travel around the United States, do you not get a sense that actually Americans don't want to do abroad? They've had enough and they want to concentrate at home.
Yeah, no, I think that's very much the case. I think that there frankly are very few broadly generalizable lessons from Libya, particularly on the military side. I think that you had the extraordinary circumstance here of Colonel Gaddafi having totally infuriated all of the other countries in the region to the point where the Arab League requested a military intervention by NATO. That's not going to happen anywhere else. It's not going to happen in Syria, but it's literally, we're never going to see that again. So I think the notion that this is going to lead to a greater sympathy and a greater orientation towards military instruments to do this kind of thing by Western powers is really not the case. In the United States, I think the interesting thing here is as you look at even the very, very conservative Republican presidential aspirants, none of them are calling for staying the course in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Now that we've killed bin Laden and seeing the just enormous difficulties of cooperation with Pakistan, I think that the U.S. is leading towards a much lower military footprint here abroad,
David,
as we head into a period where we work towards re-energizing things at home.
Okay, thank you all very much.